This is KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guest today is Tim Hankewich, Music Director of Orchestra Iowa, of course, joining me from his home. And those watching the video version of this can see that, not surprisingly, his home environs look like you would imagine an orchestra conductor. Look, there's a big old shelf of LPs on one side, nice art on the other. So, and since he's Canadian, he's still wearing a down vest.
Yeah. Hey, I know Iowa weather. I think in a month it's probably going to snow again, so just be careful.
So obviously the orchestra programming is suspended like everything else during this interim time. So tell me how you're keeping busy.
Well, I've been doing lots of videos, just sort of staying relevant on our own website. I've been doing some Christmas arranging, taking a lot of walks, and also lots of behind-the-scenes meetings of, what the next steps are going to be with the orchestra. This is quite a conundrum for the orchestra world. I think we all know that the service industry has taken a real hit. Everybody in the gig economy is going to be hurting really bad. And we just want to make sure that there's something for them to come back to in terms of our musicians just after we get through this, the next couple of months, however long this is going to be. So we're doing a lot of strategic planning about how to make sure our balance sheet stays workable and that sort of stuff. Yeah, probably like everybody else.
Well, and of course, here in our local area, this is our second go around with this. I mean, you were, 10 years ago, you just arrived, just ahead of the flood. And I remember having many conversations with you about how orchestras that lost their home, what was it, 60% of them, 90% of them were not able to continue operating. And of course, Orchestra Iowa came back strong from that. But now we're looking at something that is an order of magnitude more complex.
Yeah, well, when crisis is thrust upon you, that means change. And those who are the most flexible will probably come out of this okay. Yeah, but it's kind of weird for the performing arts industry because the whole idea behind the whole purpose behind live performance is to bring people together. Especially an audience. If there's no audience, there's no performance. But even with a symphony orchestra, you need 70 people on stage to make a performance. And so this crisis has almost tailor-made to hit us where it hurts.
There's no way an orchestra can sit 6 feet apart.
Yeah, it doesn't work very well. and on the other hand, if you're a single artist, I mean, you can stream your music and do things like this. But when you're a large ensemble, it's a magnitude of greater complexity. That's actually quite impossible for us to continue.
Well, and we continue to promote and encourage musicians to do that, and encourage people who are able to
download the music,
download the music.
Absolutely.
Buy a t-shirt from the website if they do a little live shot and put up a virtual tip jar or their Venmo account, drop a few dollars in there. The other thing is it's really hard to lose sight of the importance of the performing arts when we're thinking about people who don't have jobs and people who, who are food insecure and things like that. But also think about how much you are using music and movies and video and things like that to get through this. And then imagine what would it be like if
without it. Yeah. You've actually touched on something. There are two directions simultaneously that we have to go. On one hand, we have to preserve the orchestra, the institution, so there is something for our musicians to come back to. At the same time, we also have to find ways of supporting our musicians because if they're not playing, they're not earning. And I kind of think that a lot of the legislation that has passed through, thank goodness, has sidelined many of the per service or the service industry gig economy. And so this is exactly where our musicians live. So finding ways of getting money into their pockets directly is one way. But at the same time, we also have to ensure that in 4 months from now or whenever this crisis is over, that there's some place for them to come back to.
Well, as people are passing the time, give us some music to quarantine by. What are so Tim Hankewich or Tim and Jill, I'm sure that you have, now classical and symphonic music is your occupation. So I'm sure that a lot of times you take a little break from that, maybe
I
in
do.
your, in your personal life after dealing with it all day. But as you, kind of think back, maybe the things that first got you interested in the on
Sure.
ramps that got you interested in classical music. What for those of us looking maybe for a little bit of a substitute, since we can't come and see the orchestra, what should we
Right.
be listening to?
Well, I got to tell you, and I'm totally not pandering. I listen to KCCK.
Always the right answer.
Always the right answer, but you're right. When I listen to classical music, that is my profession. That is going to work. That's my musical lunchbox, if you will. And um, so I do listen to jazz a lot. It's also it's hard not to smile when you listen to jazz music, because symphonic music emotionally runs the entire emotional gamut from joy to sorrow. And right now, I think we need a whole lot more joy in our lives. That's why I tend to gravitate toward jazz, because it's so usually very optimistic kind of music. But as for the symphonic music, I was just writing something for the symphony. This weekend we were supposed to perform the Mozart Requiem, the last piece that Mozart wrote. And I was writing about my recollections. I was 16 years old when I first heard the piece. It was right on the tail end of the movie, after the movie
Amadeus.
Amadeus was released. And that piece, the Mozart Requiem, was featured very prominently throughout the entire movie. So it made a huge impression on me. And so I was thinking back to my very first recording that I bought of it. And the very first recordings of pieces that you hear leave an imprint on your memory. And that no matter how hard I try to, approach music artistically with a blank slate, those early recordings I heard as a child are still whispering in the back of my mind. And so this particular recording that I heard was of Christopher Hogwood and the Academy of Ancient Music performing the Mozart Requiem. So that's one suggestion I have for you. My wife, her favorite piece that she listens to at least twice a day is Prokofiev's First Symphony, because it is so buoyant and ebullient and bubbly, and she's smiling right now as she hears me say that. So there's a good place for you to start.
Okay. All right. Well, those are a couple, and let's check in. Let's check in as time goes by, Tim. While we're still kind of working remotely, and maybe have some more suggestions for things that people can listen to and get an update on what's happening. And I know that you've been posting some pretty funny videos, and I'll put those up on the KCCK Facebook page too.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. As we have a lot of time on our hands, there is also opportunity to reconnect with your loved ones, either through electronic media, or if there happen to be your family underneath your room, but it also underneath your roof. But at the same time, it's also an opportunity for us to have a little fun. And so find ways of keeping optimistic and keeping buoyant through this dark time.
Tim, thanks so much for being with me today, and we'll stay in touch.
You bet. Thanks for asking. Glad to see you.
You can hear the Culture Crawl live on the radio most weekdays at 10:20, or download the podcast, watch or listen on your own schedule at kcck.org/culture, or using your favorite podcast catcher app. And if you are watching the video, stay tuned, because I'm going to put one or two of Tim's videos up at the very end of this particular video segment as well. And if you're listening on the radio, of course, go visit KCCK's Facebook or YouTube pages, and you can watch them there. Tim, thanks again.
Cheers. Good to see you. Hello, everybody. Tim Hankewich here, Music Director of Orchestra Iowa, and I'm here standing on my balcony practicing extreme social distancing. And I want you to meet somebody. I want you to meet my neighbor, Dr. Campbell. Let's see if you can find him way out there. Yeah, there he is. Attaboy. I think this might actually improve our relationship.